Something just happened at the highest court in the United States, and it could change the future of gun ownership for millions of people almost overnight. The Supreme Court has issued a ruling that is already sending shockwaves across the country. Legal experts are calling it one of the most significant Second Amendment decisions in years. And depending on how this decision is interpreted, millions of firearms could suddenly fall into a legal gray area. Right now, people are confused. Some are worried. Others are celebrating. But almost everyone agrees on one thing. This ruling is big. At the center of this case is a simple but powerful question. What exactly counts as a legal firearm under federal law? It sounds straightforward, but the answer is anything but simple. For years, federal agencies have tried to define and regulate certain types of weapons and modifications. Things like stabilizing braces, certain rifle configurations, and firearm components have all been under scrutiny. Some were allowed, some were restricted, and some were caught in a back-and-forth battle between lawmakers, courts, and regulators. Now, the Supreme Court has stepped in, and what they said could change everything. The case that led to this ruling didn't start as a massive national headline. It began quietly, like many legal battles do. A group challenged a federal regulation, arguing that it overstepped legal authority. They claimed the rule unfairly classified certain firearms in a way that could turn law-abiding citizens into criminals overnight. Lower courts were split. Some agreed with the regulation, others didn't. The confusion grew, and eventually, the case made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. When the justices agreed to hear it, many knew something major was coming, but few expected just how far-reaching the impact could be. In its decision, the court focused heavily on how federal agencies interpret the law, specifically, whether those agencies have the power to expand definitions beyond what Congress clearly wrote. That might sound technical, but here's why it matters. If an agency changes how a firearm is defined, even slightly, that change can affect millions of people. A gun that was legal yesterday could suddenly require special registration today, or even be banned outright. And that's exactly what this case was about. The court examined whether regulators went too far, whether they created rules that effectively rewrote the law instead of enforcing it. And in a closely watched opinion, the justices drew a line. They made it clear that agencies cannot simply reinterpret laws in ways that create major new restrictions without clear approval from Congress. That sounds like a limit on government power. But here's where things get complicated, because depending on how you read the decision, it could also mean that certain classifications used for years may no longer hold up. And that opens the door to uncertainty. A lot of uncertainty. Some legal analysts believe this ruling could invalidate parts of existing gun regulations. Others warn it might trigger new legal challenges across the country. And then there's the biggest question of all. What happens to the millions of firearms that were affected by those rules? Right now, no one has a complete answer. Some experts say the ruling could protect gun owners by limiting sudden regulatory changes. Others say it could create chaos as courts and agencies try to figure out what rules still apply. Gun owners are watching closely. So are lawmakers. Because this decision doesn't just affect one type of firearm, it could reshape how all firearm laws are interpreted moving forward. Think about that for a moment. This isn't just about one policy. It's about the entire system used to regulate guns in America. And systems like that don't change quietly. They shift with impact. Already, reactions are pouring in. Some officials say the court has restored balance by reinforcing the role of Congress. Others warn the decision could weaken efforts to regulate certain weapons. Advocacy groups on both sides are responding fast. Statements are being released. Legal teams are preparing new cases. And behind the scenes, federal agencies are reviewing what this ruling means for their authority. Because make no mistake, this decision doesn't just close a chapter, it opens several new ones. And each one could lead to more court battles, more rulings, and possibly more changes. For everyday people, the situation feels unclear. If you own a firearm, You might be wondering, does this affect me? The honest answer right now is, it depends. It depends on what type of firearm you own. It depends on how future courts interpret this ruling. And it depends on how lawmakers respond in the coming months. Because Congress could step in. They could pass new laws to clarify definitions. Or they could leave things as they are, allowing the courts to sort it out over time. Either way, the legal landscape has shifted. And when that happens, it rarely settles quickly. There's also another layer to this story that many people are just starting to notice. The ruling touches on a broader issue: how much power federal agencies should have. This goes beyond gun laws. It affects environmental rules, financial regulations, health policies, almost everything that agencies oversee. So while the headline focuses on firearms, the ripple effects could reach much further. That's part of why this decision is getting so much attention. It's not just about guns, it's about authority, who has it, and where the limits are. Back in the courtroom, the justices were clearly divided on some aspects of the case. Different opinions were written, different interpretations were shared, and that division reflects a larger national debate, a debate that has been building for years. Now, it's front and center again, and it's not going away anytime soon. Legal experts are already predicting a wave of new challenges, cases that test how far this ruling goes, cases that try to define its limits, and cases that could eventually return to the Supreme Court once again. Because when a decision raises more questions than answers, that's usually just the beginning. For now, one thing is certain: this ruling matters a lot. It has the potential to affect millions of people, to reshape legal standards, and to influence how laws are written and enforced in the future. But the full impact? That will take time to unfold. Courts will interpret, agencies will adjust, lawmakers will react. And through all of it, the public will be watching, waiting, trying to understand what it all means. Because when it comes to something as important as constitutional rights, every word matters, every interpretation matters, and every decision carries weight. Right now, the country is in that moment, a moment where everything feels uncertain, but also significant. The kind of moment that people look back on later and say, that's when things started to change. And as more details emerge, as more voices weigh in, and as the legal process continues, one thing is becoming clear. This story is far from over. In fact, it's just getting started. What makes this situation even more intense is what could happen next. Because this ruling didn't come with a simple, clean outcome. It didn't clearly say everything is legal or everything is illegal. Instead, it created a space where interpretation will decide the future. And that's where things start to get serious. Across the country, courts are now being forced to take a closer look at cases that were once considered settled. Laws that were enforced for years may now be questioned again. Judges will have to ask, were those rules based on solid authority, or were they stretched beyond what the law actually allowed? That question alone could reopen dozens, even hundreds of legal battles. And here's why that matters. Because every time a court re-examines a rule, the outcome could be different. One state might uphold a restriction, while another strikes it down. One court might say a certain firearm is legal, while another court disagrees. That creates something the legal system tries hard to avoid: a patchwork of laws. In one place, a gun could be perfectly legal. In another place, that same gun could bring serious legal consequences. And until higher courts step in again, that confusion can last for years. Now think about what that means for everyday people. For gun owners, this isn't just a legal debate. It's personal. It affects what they can own, how they store it, and whether they are following the law. For law enforcement, it creates a different kind of challenge. Officers rely on clear rules. They need to know what is allowed and what is not. When those lines become blurred, enforcement becomes more complicated. And for lawmakers, the pressure is building. Because when the courts send a message that rules need clearer authority, the responsibility shifts back to Congress. Lawmakers may now be forced to act. They could draft new legislation to define firearms more precisely. They could try to close gaps that the court has exposed. Or they could struggle to reach agreement, leaving the issue unresolved. And that last option might be the most likely. Because gun laws have always been one of the most divided topics in American politics. Finding common ground is difficult, and now, with the Supreme Court raising the stakes, that challenge has become even greater. At the same time, federal agencies are in a difficult position. For years, they relied on their ability to interpret laws and apply them to new situations. Technology changes. Firearm designs evolve. And agencies often step in to decide how those changes fit within existing laws. But now, that power may be more limited. The court has signaled that agencies cannot go too far beyond what Congress clearly says. So what happens when a new type of firearm or accessory appears? What happens when it doesn't fit neatly into old definitions? Without the flexibility to interpret broadly, agencies may have to wait for Congress to act. And that could take time. A lot of time. During that period, uncertainty grows, and uncertainty can lead to more legal challenges. Already, attorneys are preparing arguments based on this ruling. They are looking at past regulations and asking, can these rules still stand under the court's reasoning? Some believe major parts of federal gun policy could be challenged. Others say the impact will be more limited. But no one is saying this will be simple. Another important detail in this story is how the justices framed their reasoning. They didn't just focus on guns. They focused on the idea that major decisions should come from elected lawmakers, not unelected regulators. That idea has been gaining attention in recent years, and this ruling reinforces it. It suggests that when a rule has a big impact on people's lives, it should be clearly authorized by Congress, not created through interpretation alone. For some, that is a victory for accountability. For others, it raises concerns about how quickly the government can respond to new challenges. Because Congress does not move fast. Debates can last months or years. And during that time, issues can remain unresolved. So now, the country is facing a kind of legal crossroads. On one path, Congress steps in and creates clear, detailed laws that leave little room for interpretation. On another path, the courts continue to handle these questions case by case, slowly building a new legal framework over time. And on yet another path, the uncertainty continues, with no clear resolution in sight. Each path comes with consequences. Each path shapes the future differently. And right now, no one knows which direction things will go. Meanwhile, public reaction is growing stronger. Some people see this ruling as a necessary correction. They believe it protects constitutional rights and limits government overreach. Others see it as a risk. They worry it could weaken certain regulations and create safety concerns. These reactions are not new, but this ruling has brought them back into focus in a powerful way. And as more people learn about the decision, those opinions are spreading. Social media is filled with debates. News outlets are covering every angle. Experts are being asked to explain what this means, not just today, but years from now. Because that's the real story here. Not just what the court said, but what it will lead to. The long-term effects could be far more important than the immediate reaction. There's also the question of how states will respond. Some states may try to pass their own laws to address the uncertainty. Others may wait and see how federal courts interpret the ruling, but that could create even more variation across the country. Different rules in different places, different outcomes for similar situations, and that adds another layer of complexity. Because the Second Amendment applies nationwide, but the way it is interpreted can vary, and now, with this ruling, that variation could increase. Another factor to watch is how future Supreme Court cases build on this decision. This will not be the last time the court looks at gun laws. In fact, it may just be setting the stage for more cases that deal with specific types of firearms. cases that focus on new technologies, cases that challenge state-level restrictions. And when those cases arrive, this ruling will likely play a key role. It will be cited, analyzed, debated, because once the Supreme Court sets a direction, it influences everything that comes after. For now, though, we are in a moment of transition. A moment where the old rules are being questioned, but the new rules are not fully clear yet. And those moments can feel uncertain. They can feel unstable. But they are also when major changes begin. If you look back at history, many important legal shifts started this way. A single case, a single decision, and then a chain reaction. That may be what we are seeing right now. A starting point, not an ending. As the legal system begins to respond, more information will come out, more decisions will be made, and slowly, a clearer picture will start to form. But until then, the situation remains fluid. And that means staying informed is more important than ever. Because this isn't just about legal theory. It's about real-world impact. It's about how laws affect daily life. And it's about how the balance of power is defined in one of the most closely watched areas of constitutional law. At this moment, millions of people are paying attention, watching what happens next, waiting for clarity, and understanding that this decision, while complex, carries real weight. It has opened the door to new possibilities, new debates, and new outcomes. And as those unfold, the full meaning of this ruling will become clearer. But one thing is already certain. The conversation around gun laws in America has entered a new phase. A phase shaped by this decision. A phase that could redefine how laws are written, interpreted, and enforced. And a phase that is only just beginning.